Have you ever seen this happen? A brand new manager, fresh out of college, is suddenly put in charge of a team of veterans who've been doing the job for, like, decades. It's a classic leadership puzzle. But in the U.S. Army, this isn't just some business school case study. It's an everyday reality. And getting it wrong can be a matter of life and death. So how on earth does the Army handle a problem that stumps even the biggest companies? Well, let's get into it.
Listen to this quote from a platoon sergeant. It just lays the stakes out there, plain and simple. We're not talking about missing quarterly targets here. We're talking about pure survival. That relationship between a brand new lieutenant and their senior non-commissioned officer, or NCO, is one of the most critical partnerships in the entire military, because if that relationship fails, people die. Period.
So how do you even begin to navigate a puzzle like that? Well, that's the exact question that Dr. R.R.P.h.D, a researcher and a former Army sergeant himself, set out to answer. See, for him, this is personal. He lived this exact dynamic firsthand serving overseas, and now he's dedicated his work to figuring out this very unique hierarchy, not just for himself, but for everyone else who has to work within it. So his research is going to be our guide today.
Okay, so to really understand the friction here, we have to start with the two completely different roads these leaders take. They might end up in the exact same unit, but their journeys to get there could not be more different. The contrast is pretty stark, right? On one side, you've got the officer. They usually show up with a 4-year degree, and they're commissioned as a leader from the moment they arrive. Their world is all about strategy and planning. But then you have the NCO. They start at the very bottom, as a private, earning every bit of their authority through years of experience in the trenches. One is handed leadership, the other has to earn it.
And you know what? The data shows just how incredibly valuable it is to have experience in both of these worlds. Just look at this chart. Officers who were enlisted first are more than twice as likely to still be in the Army after 10 years. That's not a small difference. That is a huge gap. It tells you that understanding the world of the NCO is a massive predictor of whether an officer will succeed.
But the differences aren't just what you see on a resume. Dr. R.R.P.h.D's research dug into something way deeper, something we don't always like to talk about. These hidden conflicts around social class and culture.
So the research brings up this key idea called cultural capital. Think of it like a form of currency, but instead of money, it's a currency of respect. And it's based on things like where you went to school, your background, even the way you talk. For an officer, their cultural capital is that degree. For an NCO, it's their years of grit and expertise. The trouble starts when those two currencies are seen as being in conflict. And this isn't just a theory. The study found this hidden class talk woven right to everyday conversations. You'll hear NCOs talk about country club officers from fancy schools, and at the same time call themselves blue-collar NCOs. These aren't just silly nicknames. They're labels that build a class divide, putting up a wall before a new leader even has a chance to prove who they are.
So this leads us to this really fascinating paradox. An officer's biggest strength, that formal education, can actually become their single greatest weakness. And it all comes down to one simple thing: their attitude.
Now this, right here, is one of the most powerful findings from all the research. It totally blows up the myth that a leader's pedigree is what really matters. It turns out, whether an officer came from the famous West Point or from another program, that just wasn't the deciding factor. What really mattered was how they acted from the second they showed up.
And this slide just lays out the two paths perfectly. On the left, you've got the officer who acts like their degree is a crown, who feels entitled to respect, and they create resentment instantly. But on the right, you see the officer who sees their education as a responsibility. They're humble, they're not afraid to admit what they don't know, and because of that, they build a ton of credibility. Same degree, totally different results.
And honestly, this one quote from the study says everything. The college degree is never the problem itself, it's all about how you carry it. Humility, that builds a bridge. Entitlement, that builds a wall. It really is that simple and that powerful.
Okay, so if attitude is the secret sauce, how do you actually put it into practice? Well, the research gives us a really clear roadmap for turning this potential disaster into an incredible partnership.
It really boils down to 3 powerful steps. First, for the new leader, show some humility. And that means literally saying the words, "I don't know, but I'm here to learn." Step 2, go out and actively seek mentorship. Recognize that an NCO's 20 years of experience is basically a PhD in their field. And third, and this goes for both leaders, practice reciprocity. Create a culture where that NCO can give you honest feedback without being afraid, and the officer actually listens with respect.
And that role as a mentor is exactly why you always hear the NCO Corps called the backbone of the military. They're the ones who hold all the institutional knowledge, they're the masters of the real-world tactics, and they're the ones tasked with shaping a new lieutenant into a leader who can actually succeed in combat. The whole system is designed around this crucial exchange of wisdom.
So Dr. Rodas' research gives us the keys to making the current system work, but it also opens up a much bigger, more fundamental question. Is this entire two-track system itself kind of obsolete?
You know, a lot of critics argue that this whole officer-enlisted divide is a relic of the past, that it creates these artificial walls that might be holding back the potential of most of the force. For instance, a junior officer's promotion is often just automatic based on time, but for an NCO to get promoted, they face these super competitive boards. It raises a really important question. Is the system actually promoting the best talent, or is it just propping up an old tradition that doesn't really serve the military today?
And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. We know the leadership paradox can be solved with humility and respect, but the structure that creates it is still there. So the real question for the future is a pretty simple one. If you were building a military for the 21st century, starting from a blank page, is this the system you would choose?